Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Motherhood Club Talk Show. This is Ekta Sehgal Malhotra in conversation with Sakshi Varma. Sakshi is a mother of three boys, 10 and 4. Well, yes, the two boys are 4 years old who are twins. Sakshi is a financial professional. She's an avid blogger who writes on parenting and women. She, as I said, is a mother of three boys. She's recently written a book called Raising Capable Children, and that is the topic of our discussion today. A lot of you would have this question in mind: capable children. Are we talking about pre existing capabilities or we create those capabilities? All those things would be spoken by Sakshi. Uh, I would say that Sakshi is a mother of substance, a woman of substance. There is enough and more that this young mother with cumulative experience of 18 years, which is 10 plus 4 plus 4, has experienced so much and more and has taken many and more bold steps as a mother, which many would think not once, not twice, but 100 times to take those decisions. And I salute this lady because, there was so much that I could, uh, you know, learn from her in my brief interaction with her. And I'm sure many of us would learn a lot more today when we have this conversation today. So, welcome, Sakshi, to the Motherhood Club Talk Show. Please introduce yourself in your own words and throw some light as to why did you choose this topic, raising capable children, for today's discussion and for the book that you have authored and all that you have experienced, the good, the bad, and the ugly till now, and how do you, most importantly, deal with all of that? So over to you, Sakshi.
Thanks so much, Ekta, for having me on this platform. And I think it's a real pleasure talking to you today and to all of you who are listening in live to this show. So, thank you so much again for having me here. You asked me to introduce myself. So, professionally, I've been working for 18 years and I've worked in the development finance field. So, basically, this is DFIs such as international lending, or my focus area is financial inclusion, which is essentially making sure that the poorest of the poor are able to access financial services. So that's my area of work. And currently, I'm actually supposed to be based in Almaty, Kazakhstan for my work. But due to the COVID pandemic, I've been here in India for the last 6 months. And I think you've already introduced me pretty well. I'm a mom of three kids, three boys actually. Missing a girl in my life, but really enjoying with these three. I also like to identify myself as the wife of a design entrepreneur. My husband is from NID NIFT and he has his own work where he designs and manufactures products. And I like to identify with that because I'm also his sounding board and I really enjoy the entrepreneurship side, precariously through him. So that's also there. And I think about 2 years ago, I got into the field of blogging, and since then, really enjoyed it. I didn't realize I had so many things to share with the world. And now, sometimes I'm surprised that I've actually come out with a book also. Uh, I can stop here, or if you would like, I can go a little more into the background on the book, as you asked.
Yes, please do, because, for all those who are listening to us or who would eventually watch this show, Sakshi, has 18 years of parenting experience, as I said. And what she hasn't mentioned is that of the three boys, there is one child who is special, special in many ways. And there are many bold decisions that Sakshi took. So Sakshi, please, share your journey with us, and then you could talk about the book that you have written and how that can help all of us as mothers, as parents. But I think it would be very, very important and essential to talk about your journey, because that is going to convey a very strong message that when you become a mother, that doesn't mean that you lose your own identity. So please do talk about that.
Sure. So thanks so much. Yeah, so I think before I even get to the mother part, I just want to briefly touch upon the kind of a person I was. I was one of those really planned people who very, very risk averse. So I needed to know what I'm going to do in life, like 3 or 10 steps beforehand. So say I was in class 8 when I said, I want to do an MBA and so on. So you decide something and then try to go for that. I'm not an aggressive person, but I'm very, very sort of focused in that sense. And the negative part is that I am hardly impulsive, So before I've thought about something, I can't take a step, which probably also makes me very boring. I don't know. So that was the kind of person I was, and always sort of worried at some level of, life, so to say, hitting me with something negative. And I don't know why, but that fear sort of always was there. So and that's why this whole planning thing, that you should plan for anything and everything. So I wanted to be married by 25, 26, have a child in 3 years, and so on. So I had my life like really cut out, and it was pretty much going to plan. I did what I wanted to do. I got the job I wanted. I married the guy I wanted to marry at the right age, also, that I had say planned years ago. um, but then obviously things are not always in your hands. So of course the first child did not come at 3 years but at 5 years, and so on. And then we got very busy. I think we really enjoyed parenting that one child of ours. It was really nice. I hear a lot of parents grumble a lot of times, but I think for us it was an awesome journey. And then by the time he was 3 or 4, we said, let's try for our second child. And that's when I think got into the planning mode again. And but by then I think we were in mid 30s, and secondary infertility and whatever. So we tried. I think I tried for a year, and for any woman who's been trying for a long time will know that this is a very tough period. Even though this was for a second child, it was tough to sort of keep doing tests and getting them negative, honestly. So there was that tough period, and then I again sort of said, let's do something about it. If we want a child, we can't keep waiting. And then we went to the doctors, and the IVF therapy and so on. So we did that, and touch wood, it's even that is a very tough time. It's not easy for the woman. On your body, it's very tough. So in fact, I know there are people who might say, you already have a child, so why are you going through that? But I don't know, I just wanted a second child. So touch wood, in the first go I did conceive, and I conceived twins, and we were really, really excited about it. I think we used to watch all these videos of twins, and it's a lot of fun, a lot of work also, but yeah. And the pregnancy, of course, was tough. It's nothing is easy with twins. I am of a small stature, small size, so also I think there was that added risk. And I was really worried throughout, and because I read a lot of these horror stories about the twins. You can, I mean, you might lose one twin or even both at times. Things I don't want to think of now, but yes, it was a tough time. And finally they were born. They were born premature, but it was 32 weeks, which is not bad at all. By then, the viability of the fetus is high, and so on and so forth. So we were very happy. They were really small, of course, tiny, but we were able to get them back from the hospital in about, the first one came in 8 days, the other one about a month or so, but everything was fine. But I think 6 months down the line, we realized that one of them was not developing as well. And the first thing I noticed was his eyesight. When I fed him, he won't look into my eyes, and that was the first thing I thought, that there's something wrong. And that's when I told my parents. My parents lived with us, and they were a huge support during that time. But everyone said, no, no, he's fine, he can look at you, he looks at us. But I wasn't convinced, honestly. So I went to a doctor, and he agreed. He said, yes, maybe there is something wrong, but he's a preemie, so wait for another 8 to 10 weeks or whatever. So all that happened, but I think within a month, our pediatrician said that something seems to be wrong. And that is when we discovered that yes, he had suffered brain damage during birth. So just a few seconds of oxygen that didn't go to him. And uh, obviously it was an extremely, extremely tough time. You don't, I mean, this baby that you have, you want to protect him from everything, but when you hear that this is something that has happened, and there's nothing that you can do about it, there's no cure for something like this. You need to learn how to live. You need to learn how to give the best to this baby. But you don't know whether or not, or to what extent can this baby become normal, so to say. Yeah. So yes, it was a very, very tough time, and I think luckily my husband was very positive through it all, and to this date he is. So whenever I kind of go down, he's able to help me. His whole attitude is able to really help me through that, and I think that's where our companionship sort of worked for us. So anyhow, so one of the responses through that experience was that I read a lot. I went online, I Googled his condition, and the other thing I Googled a lot was similar experiences from parents to see what life is, what can my child expect. But I found a lot of things, but they were all from parents from the US, maybe Europe, Australia, nothing, literally maybe one or two blogs about a child who has special needs from India. So I think this is what led to the birth of this blog. When I said, I want to write about this. I want to write about our experience. So tomorrow, if someone searches, they can find something. And also, to an extent, raise awareness. 20% of the world's population, 15 to 20, has some disability or the other. And it is such a large minority group that, but we don't realize. And it was only after I came out, I wrote a blog. Now everyone around me knows I have a child with special needs, that I started to realize how many people just around me have kids with some special need or the other. There were colleagues who came to me and said, look, our child has special needs and so on. Something they would never have mentioned or admitted otherwise. So I started to write about that. And when I started to write, frankly, I realized that there's a lot more I want to talk about. So parenting in general, women, inspiring women, and so on. So that's how the blog kind of took shape. So now I write, as you mentioned, about a lot of things that I feel strongly about. So in long, actually, this has been the journey.
So I believe your younger sons are 4 years old and the older one is 10.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So they're about turn 4 in December. Yeah.
Right. And as you mentioned in the beginning that you work overseas.
Yeah.
So how does that work? I mean, does the entire family move overseas with you, or because the children are in their, I mean, the older one is 10 and the younger ones are, either have or would soon start their formal education also. So how does it work? I mean, how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, so I think I'll go back to the one sentence you mentioned earlier, that a mother need not lose her own identity. After becoming a mother, her career, her other interests stay as is. And touch wood, I have an extremely supportive family. So even before this, I think before we even had any child, I once had the opportunity to work in Bombay. And obviously my husband couldn't move because as I said, he has his own business. So again, there were questions about, can I live in a different city and so on. So that was some 10 years ago. And that was one time when my husband really said, no, you need to go. This is a good opportunity and go for it. So that was the first time we sort of tested this staying apart kind of a thing. But obviously things become much more complicated when you have 3 kids, and one of them is a special needs child. So again, going back to the year of 2017, which is when I was really grappling with a lot of issues, the grief, it is grief, when you find out your child has special needs. I was grappling with that, and also work. And there's a certain kind of guilt because you feel you're not giving your enough either at home or at work because of this whole mindset you're in. So I think in all of that, and just as background, I work with an international development finance organization. So we have a lot of internal opportunities as well. So I just, out of my frustration, wanting to just probably get some change, I applied for an overseas job. Without knowing what will happen. And within a few months, the call for an interview came. I gave the interview, and we happily discussed at home how to do that if we move. And like I said, my parents lived with us, so I also sort of knew that initially I'll have to probably shift alone, but I have my parents and so on. So we discussed that, and everyone was open about it. We all looked at it actually as an adventure. But by the time the call for the job came, I had lost my dad. So that was the second big shock that came my way within, I think, 8 months. Within 8 months. So in July 2017, we discovered my child has special needs, and within 6 months of that, in February of 2018, I lost my dad very suddenly. So I think before I could get up from one sort of blow, another one was dealt. And then again, I couldn't leave my kids on just my mom and my husband. So we again thought about it, but my mother and my husband said, look, we will manage. This is something, this is a once in a time, lifetime opportunity. You should do that and things will work out. So I think, as I said, initially I was one of those people who wanted to plan ahead, but here there was nothing I could plan. And this was when I sort of started to trust in, the fact that things will turn out okay. Right. So I had to believe that before taking that step. And frankly, it did all work out. So last year in May, I moved to Almaty, Kazakhstan. The good thing is it is just 4 hours away from India, 4 hours of plane ride. And things started to fall into place. I actually moved my older son with me. So he studies there. For him, the exposure is great. And hopefully within a year, I would be moving my mother and the two twins also. So tough decision, but we went into it with full faith. And like I said, things have worked out, touch wood. So, yeah.
So your mom had taken the role of the primary caretaker of both the children.
Yes, so she and my husband, but yes, primarily she, especially for the special needs child. And, I sort of armed her with a nanny who could stay. And then, at one point we had two 24-hour people helping us. So yes, and in fact, in the last 1 year, my mother has stayed in Bombay. My sister is there. So with the babies, with the nanny, they've been sort of moving around. So yes, it's been tough, but also enjoyable and exciting to a certain extent.
Right. So while you took this decision of moving to Kazakhstan with your older one, and having the two boys, the young boys, the infants back here in India with your husband and your mother, what were the emotions or what were the thoughts that passed your mind? Did it ever make you think or feel that what would the world say? And what is it that your husband or your mom would have to hear from friends and relatives who would want to talk about this and make it a kind of a topic of gossip? So what were the emotions that you and your family went through?
Yeah, so I think this probably was one of the biggest decisions that we took, which are different from the societal norms. But we've done small things here and there, which are, sort of slightly different, where people have raised their eyebrows at least. And another good thing is that my parents-in-law are also very, very open-minded. So that is one level less that you have to deal with. So something very simple as not changing your surname after marriage, there was no opposition, for example. But I do know that there are people who still can't imagine doing something as simple as that, right? I remember a colleague, he was like, oh, really? So you didn't change your surname? So for him, it seemed like it's something totally out of the world. Or when I went to Bombay, leaving my husband in Delhi, there were people who came and said, oh, how does he manage? I said, you never asked how I manage. I am also staying here alone. If I can manage, so can he. Why have you just assumed that he needs a wife to take care of him? So, those little things have happened. Then in 2011, my parents moved in with me. So again, that is something not common. People don't live with their daughters. And if you look at some of these movies, they don't drink water in their daughter's house. And they moved in. And I remember another colleague, he said, oh, that's not, normal or whatever. So we've had that. But plus my work had a lot of travel. So, I know a lot of women have the guilt of leaving kids behind and traveling. So I think all of those steps probably prepared us to take this much bigger step, and the first step is that your immediate family is okay. And like I said, my mother, my husband were okay, my in-laws were okay. They never raised the question. And later my mother-in-law even said that she was worried how we will manage, but she didn't say anything. And then when she came to visit us, she said, now I'm happy. I can see how well you've settled and I'm not worried anymore. So that's there. That support matters a lot. But I know I think soon after I moved, I remember for the first few months I felt, I was like, oh my God, what will people think? This woman left two of her small children back home on her mother, one of them special needs. Yes, it happened to me, and I thought a lot about it, and I was like, that, that lasted luckily for a few months, not more. And I think when my mother-in-law came, and then my mother came, when they stayed, when I saw that everyone was happy, they saw they could settle well, I think I didn't worry about the larger society. I said, let them think. And I think in terms of taking that decision also, I looked at a lot of other women, So for example, my husband has a chachi. She's a doctor, and I think when her kids were small, she went to the UK to study, right, and left them. And he told me, and in fact, he was the one who said, "Look, the children have turned out so well. They're actually more confident than." I think when they were 6, 7, or whatever, they were traveling alone internationally. You can just see what kind of an exposure those kids got. So I looked at all similar examples, drawing inspiration from them, and that helped. So I just hope, and I wrote a blog also on that, that another woman somewhere stuck between choices like this is able to, take maybe some inspiration that, look, another woman has done this, maybe I can too. And she does what she wants to do. The reason I joined this large organization was to get at some point international exposure. So like I said, I'm sort of trying to follow the dream that I always had.
Super, very good. But tell me, I'm going to come to the raising the capable children part in some time, but these things are very important to come out loud and clear that we women, especially, or for that matter, whether it is the father or the mother, because we have procreated another human being, does that mean that we forget to live our life? Because somewhere, if we forget to do that, then the frustration, the anger, the everything sets in, and those so happy and positive emotions do tend to go towards the negative direction. So Sakshi, I have a very direct question for you. One was the society, what they thought, but as a mother, how easy or tough was it for you to take that decision, to leave behind those two babies who probably would have felt more attached with you while you would have been here? What were the emotions that you alone went through? That is one. And second, today, when you are here and you are with the boys, all three of them are there with you. How the, how is the equation, between the three sons and between you and those two boys?
Yeah, so it was tough, like I said. It's not easy leaving your kids behind. So it was definitely tough, and I still remember I left on 30th of April, and at the same time, my mom left with my special needs child to Bombay because there is some therapy he gets there, and the third one was remaining in Delhi, and my in-laws were here. So we were actually splitting into three. So the family came to drop us. We dropped my mother to the domestic airport. Then they dropped me at the international airport. And I think leaving Abir, who's the middle one, basically, it was a very, it was like a pang. I went in and I was like, oh my God, I don't know when I will see them. Even though I knew in within 2 months, I'll see them. I was just 4 hours away. But it was, I mean, it hit me hard, right? So, and more than me, my own emotions, it was this baby, because he was 2.5 at that time. And unlike my first one, who sort of more, he was okay with me traveling, this one was a little more, he clung to me a bit more, and I left him. So it did hit me, and how he would feel. For example, Anvay, who's my special needs child, he's anyway somehow more connected with Nani. So I know he would miss his Nani more than he misses me, I know, because she takes him for therapy and so on. But it was, leaving, and Arnav, the elder one, he's pretty much on his own. So it was, leaving Abir hit me a lot at that particular moment. And I still remember that in June they visited me, and then I came back with them and stayed the month here in July. And then when I left, I didn't have the heart to tell him that, look, I'm going. By that time, we had decided that Arnav will move in with me, and Anvay was happily with with Nani. And I think a few days later, my mother sent me a video with him on the phone, fake phone. Where are you, Mama? I looked at it and I broke down. It was really, really tough to, sort of uh, try and understand this child who's bewildered. My mother was with me for a month and then she suddenly disappeared. What happened? So it was tough, but then we kept meeting. He's visited me. So the good part about being just 4 hours away is that we met each other every 2 to 3 months. Plus I knew I will move them at some point, so it was not as if it's a very long kind of separation or whatever. So yeah, but I met them in December. I left them. Uh, we met for New Year's. Then I came back again. So every parting is tough with all of the kids. So none of these things are easy, but when they are there, now he wants to come with me to Almaty. So it's a give and take, you sort of realize that. And then I feel that the exposure they will ultimately get is going to count much more than probably these fleeting emotions, as I say, in life.
True. Very true. It indeed, one has to be really strong as an individual and as a family to be able to take these tough decisions. And, moving on to raising capable children. If you could throw some light on this, that what exactly
Yeah.
does this mean, and how does one identify who is capable and who is not? Does that mean this, or does it mean that every child has his or her own abilities? It is just that you need to harness those abilities and hone up those abilities for them to be capable in their own way. If you
Yes.
could throw some light on this, please.
Yeah, so I think you got it, in your second part, that we're all different. I am as different from you as from my own sister, for example, right? Even if you have been raised by the same parents, you have your inherent traits and capabilities. So it is not about who's capable or who's not, but more about the kind of people we are and how we are able to then fashion ourselves in life. By fashioning, I mean, how are we building our own personalities? At 40 plus, I'm still developing myself, right? It's not as if I have already become the person I will ever be. No, I'm still changing, developing, and so on. And as parents, we sort of start work in a way on our child or children from birth, knowingly or even unknowingly. Every action of ours is shaping them in some way or the other. So when I talk about raising capable children, I'm basically talking about raising individuals who are capable of making their own decisions or choices or getting themselves out of the various situations life will throw at them, right? Because as a child, I don't want anything, I mean, as a parent, I don't want anything to happen to my child, right? If possible, I would lay out the path in front of them. We don't want them to have or face anything negative. Or when my child feels bullied, I feel bad, I want to go and scold those children, but I don't want to do it. I want my child to be able to deal with that situation. Yeah. So the capability part is just that. It is not about saying someone is capable or someone is not, but just making sure that your children are confident people, they have faith in themselves and their own capabilities or their decisions. And that is why in the book that I've written, I've sort of divided it into three parts, which is on the values, on attitudes, and the skills that we would need to have. None of us will have all of them exactly the same, right? But we can try, seeing the nature of our child, we can see how we can develop them into that kind of, those kind of individuals, basically.
So for all of you, just to give you a background that, while Sakshi decided to write her book or started her blogs a few years back, but writing is in her blood. I believe your parents or your grandparents have written a few books, and yeah, and so so writing is in her blood, and like I said, that she not only writes for about parenting or about children, but also highlights stories of women who are not celebrities, but who are celebrities in their own ways, where they are doing something which is exceptional. They are fighters. They aspire to inspire. They are women of substance and a lot more. So, Sakshi, uh, let's talk a little bit more about parenting, right? Uh, taking care of a child who is, pardon me from using certain words, but a normal child is a lot more easier. But when you take care of children who are, who are with special needs or who are differently able, and more so, when you have twins. So now that you are here and you are, hands on while dealing with them, so how do you manage that? Because I mean, are they identical twins or they are fraternal twins?
No, they're fraternal twins.
Okay. So are there any similarities in them, or are there any commonalities, which you identify in them? And how does each of them view each other? Because, they would see, "Okay, we are of the same age, but one is different and the other is different." So how does that, how does it work? And also with the older one, because for him, they are like 6 years apart, and he's had more time to be with you. So how does he respond to you when he sees that you are giving a little attention to the sibling? How does that work? How does the sibling, what do I say, the connection work?
So I think Arnav, who's my firstborn, he's been a very, very easy child. And so, I mean, in fact, we never knew that. I mean, you hear about toddler tantrums and whatever. We didn't have any of those with him. So he's been easy, and I think at some level he's already fairly mature. So touch wood, we didn't have the kind of sibling rivalry issues that we would have expected. He was, I think, about to turn 7 when these guys were born. So he was more excited, luckily, and he didn't feel that the attention sort of went away from him. And as I said, he didn't really cling on to me. He was happy in his own world. So to him, it didn't feel as if a lot of attention was going on these kids, which it was, frankly, because they were uh, preemies, and preemies need extra care. So I was busy with them. My parents were busy with them. What we did discuss, Kapil and I, Kapil is my husband, that he should maintain this conversation or discussion with him. So I remember he used to, Kapil would take Arnav out. Arnav loves to read, so he would take him out to keep this individual one-on-one conversation, so that if at all he is feeling something, he knows that there is a parent who's listening to him. So we, of course, we managed, but luckily Arnav didn't pose that many, sort of challenges in that sense. And I think since we've discovered that Anvay has special needs, I've also started to groom Arnav in the sense that telling him that, look, you have to take care of him, you have to be responsible for him in a way. So this is something that you're trying to make him be protective about. Arnav is also still 10, so in some ways he's quite a child, but he started to sort of understand that. I remember once, I think this was probably when the twins were not even one, when Arnav said that he had figured by then that there's something wrong with Anvay. And he said, Mama, if he can't see, then, I will show him my cricket. Arnav was doing cricket academy at that time. So he said, I will make him touch the ball or the bat to show him. And I was really touched, because till then we hadn't really explained anything to Arnav. We were still grappling with it ourselves, frankly. So that kind of understanding, I think, has already come in him, and we're making sure that he's not left out. So even if the other two are playing, at least have Anvay in the same room so that he can enjoy your shouts and laughter. So even though Anvay is about to be 4, he's really developmentally delayed. He's just started to creep right now, so he can't stand. His vision, he can see, but it's not as good as normal vision and so on. He can't speak, so there are a lot of issues. So it's not that easy to involve him or include him. But what I'm trying to tell Arnav is to make sure he does that. And Abir also, I think, slowly, with toddlers, you see that their maturity develops slowly. So more recently I'm seeing that he's very protective about Anvay as well. Yeah, so again, this is not of our teaching, but he tries to make sure, like, yes, just yesterday the 3 kids were in one room playing, and Arnav actually left the room and switched off the light without realizing that Anvay is there. And Abir just came and he's like, look, Mama, switch on the light, switch on the light. So I need to make sure that they're both protective about Anvay, because by now I think we've realized that it is not likely that Anvay will be fully normal. Like in the beginning we still had that hope, but not anymore. So I'm now trying to prepare the other two to make sure that they retain those feelings and can take care of him later. And in terms of likeness, I think that is probably one regret I'll always have, that they look similar and sometimes I get confused. But in terms of personality, we are not able to get a full sense of the kind of person Anvay would have been. Like Abir has turned out to be a very fiery, naughty sort of a child, very unlike Arnav. Anvay, I don't fully know how he would have been, right? So that is a bit difficult for me to figure out. But we do know his personality. He's a very happy child. Um, doesn't cry unless there is something really troubling him. So that that happy disposition is something that we are really, really grateful for, frankly. So
So while the doctors figured out that there is some challenge with him, have they been able to diagnose what the challenge is? That because of that brain damage, what is the diagnosis for him?
yeah, so basically he comes under cerebral palsy, but that's a very large spectrum. So you will have people with cerebral palsy who study, who do everything, but they can't walk or whatever. On the other spectrum, you can have people who are very severely disabled as well. So it's a whole spectrum, and everything depends on how much the damage has been to the brain, and also how well that brain then slowly adjusts. So like I said, I think one of the toughest is not knowing. It's like, even for something like, say, I'll give an example of cancer. At least you're told that this is first stage, third stage, or you have some idea. Here we are grappling with a lot of unknowns, so which means you can keep the hope alive, but it also means that you have no clue how things will turn out. And that's again, to my whole planning personality. I can't plan anything. I don't know. I don't know what to expect. So you just continue with the therapies with him and so on. uh,
Sure, sure, sure. So let's get back to talking about the, so this topic is really giving me goosebumps, and I'm sure it's not very easy for you to, relive those memories. Uh, Share a little more about raising capable children, a few examples or a few experiences that you had, which may help, many of us to understand as to how can we really focus on raising capable children. Because, like I always say in many of my talks, and I am also I won't say a victim to it, but I'm also a party to it. That we all come with a certain amount of legacy. We all come with a certain amount of baggage, the kind of parenting that we grew up with, or the kind of things that we have seen and read, and of course, as generation by generation, child by child, we evolve. Because a lot of people say, and I completely agree, that our children are our biggest teachers. They teach us so many things. So, if you could share some light on this, that how can one work towards it? I mean, how should one go about it? What are the things that we shouldn't do? Or what are the things that we really, really know, which is absolutely important to focus on while trying to raise capable children?
right. So you raised a very important point when you said we all come with our baggage. And in fact, in the book, even before I get into the chapters, I've said that there are 2 3 things you need to read before getting there. And one of them is, for first of all, understand yourself, right? Because you will see, you've been a parent, that a lot of our own insecurities actually get into the way we parent. So if I grew up with a certain complex, I will either try and make sure that my child is not like that, or somewhere or the other this will sort of, if maybe my parents were too strict, I might become too lenient, which might also not be good, or vice versa. Or my own insecurities, I thought maybe I'm not good at something, so I'm forcing my child to do that. So a lot of it comes from our own personality. So I think it's very important to understand how you are as a person, and how that might be flowing into the way you are parenting your child. Very, very small example. I loved theater. Yeah. And all these performing arts kind of things. But my son shows no interest. So initially, I had the impulse to kind of push him into doing, like, I remember in school when some of these choices for clubs came out, I was like, why don't you want to join the theater club or whatever? But then I had to realize that, look, this is not me, this is him. He can like something totally different which I don't understand at all. So very small example, but our own expectations or thoughts about what we wanted to be, and half the time, since we couldn't be what we wanted to be, we want our children to be that, right? So that's one. The second, I think, is understanding your child. So again, your two children will be very different, and I can see it here in my house. uh, Two very different personalities, and the third one is also very different, and I have to deal with them differently. Or I really like to take the example of my mother, who, between my sister and I, the way she dealt with each of us was very different. I was more extrovert. I was um, sort of, like I said, planning. I sort of always knew what I wanted to do and planned for it. My sister was very different. So she let me be in the way I was and guided my sister in a totally different way. And the kind of relationships we share with our mother are also different. The three of us are close, but she's different with her mother and I'm different with mine, in a way. So that's very important to understand our children, and rather than kind of putting them down. And again, that's a very common impulse, and I'm sure I do it also. I'll tell my son, why are you being lazy or whatever, uh, as an impulse. But on the whole, we need to keep it positive. We need to train them, to be, if we know, all of us have sort of um, pain points, but we can't cure them fully, but we can just help them handle. Like, for example, if my eyes are weak, I'll use spectacles to improve that. So that's what we can do. If your child is introvert, you cannot and should not try and get them into debating, for example, right? You help them what they are interested in doing. So that, I think, is very, very important in being a parent. And
To the strength.
yeah, and frankly, I also keep referring to the book sometimes when I'm struggling, because I can't remember my own tips always. So this is something, it has to be very careful parenting in a way. It's very easy to slip into what you are, but you need to be very conscious of the parenting that you are trying to do, I feel.
So
So
how does one do that? Because I mean, there is a inherent nature or an inherent characteristic that each of us has. And many a times, as you rightly said, that as a parent, I could be aggressive, and my child could be very, uh, like sublime or not very aggressive. Could be an introvert. I could be an exceptional speaker. The child may be least bothered about all these things. So how does one work towards it? How do you maintain that balance? See, after all, if your parenting is of a certain number of years of experience, you yourself are at a certain age, so that is a number of experience that you've had of your personality.
yeah.
So so how does one balance that? How do you kind of find a mid path, or um, how did you actually, let me ask this way, how did you do that? Like, now that you have shared so many ideas and tips in the book, I'm sure they're based out of your experience, based out of your probably your interaction with a couple of other parent friends who you would have, and or you would have thought through with it, how, you know so how did your parenting style change?
Yeah,
Mhm.
so the book is my experience, but more than my experience, I read a lot. I read a lot about parenting and sort of put them together, because, like I said, I'm just one person, and if I only put in my style, then it'll just suit maybe a few people who are like me. So, which is why, to make it something that is useful for everyone, I have tried to research all the topics and put in tips which everyone can use. So that is one. Um, Secondly, I think, in terms of how you do it, I believe it is all about being thoughtful and conscious. We can all, I mean, our children might be really irritating us and we lose our head. It happens to me. After years, I've realized that on the whole, I'm a very calm person, but sometimes something snaps, and that's when you scream, right? So I know that, and I end up screaming as well, but then I need to go back and correct that, right? My mother used to say something very interesting. If from the one hand you're breaking something, from the other you need to put it back together also, right? So this is what I do. Like, I think with some, like with my son, the elder one, for example, and I still struggle to make him sit and do his homework. Now, I was someone who never had to be told, and I just cannot understand, frankly. how someone cannot understand what they're expected to do and do it. But I keep working on him, right? There are times I've screamed at him. There are times I've taken away his privileges, say, no, you can't watch TV or the phone or whatever. And I'm slowly trying to get that responsibility thing in him, right? So, or take, take Abir, for example. He's pretty, so let's say wild or whatever. So, the lockdown has not been easy, right? So I work full time, so I'm working, but also I have these kids screaming their heads off because they have nothing to do, and trying to control that behavior. Now he is impulsive, he makes noise. I cannot, unlike Arnav, who's a shant person who will easily, read a book or whatever. This one needs to run around, needs to let that energy off. And I remember I used to go crazy. So there was a time somewhere in the middle of the lockdown that I started to get very angry. I would, as a punishment, put him in his chair and say, now you sit here. And he has an ego, so he will, and if you say sorry, he will not say sorry. So this is a 3-year-old who's battling with me and refusing to say sorry, and I'm losing my mind. And then I think after a month or so, I said, this is totally nonsensical. I'm not behaving like a mature parent, and he's a 3-year-old, so he can't behave maturely anyway. So how do I tackle it? So then slowly, trying to make sure I when he got totally out of control because of his impulses, I would put him in the chair but give him something to play. So then that didn't become a punishment, and he would calm down. Or I think I wrote a chapter on discipline. So this book is a result of 26 blogs, and when I shared it with others, that particular blog, I think one of my aunts said that, I used hugs or something as actually discipline. I couldn't make sense of that. But then what I did was, whenever Abir went out of control, I would call him and hug him. Just catch. So one, that calmed him down, and two, it made him feel happy. So even now, whenever I get angry, he comes and says, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" And I realize it's important for him to be happy. He just cannot control his totally wild instincts at times. So then we got into, so there was a month when I think I was totally clueless how to handle this child and this situation. But then I think we've done it. But like I said, you have to, if something is troubling you, just, we need to think through our own behavior, how we need to manage our own behavior. So I think that thinking through probably is very important. We'll all lose our head at times, everyone does, so.
I'll ask you one more hard-hitting question.
Sure.
Whenever we have children who are differently able, our tolerance, our patience level are very high, right, as compared to children who are normal, for the lack of a better word, who are normal.
Yeah.
Why does that happen? Is it because we feel guilty? Or is it because we do have that compassion and empathy towards that, look, this child, the comprehension is probably slow, or there are some challenges, and that is why he or she is doing. But when it is any other child, and this includes me also, because I equally have a very naughty child, and I think they're pretty much around the same age, and it doesn't matter whether it's a boy or a girl, they're very hyperactive these days, and they're like very naughty. So why, norm most, and this is not just, I'm asking you, and this is my question to everybody, that so is it that our reaction is to the challenge that is there? Because the child is the same. You are the mother to the child, or you are the parent to the child, but yet we behave differently. Why does that happen? I'm sure it would have, it's a bouncer, it's a googly that I've thrown at you. You want to think through it, fine, but if you have an answer to it, I would really like to know, because this one question really uh, you know uh, bugs me many a time, especially, when I see, as you said, that, we do lose our cool, we are working, and children tend to have a habit of taking their parents for granted, or troubling them, or intentionally doing certain things which they would not do otherwise. So you
Yeah.
do lose it, right? Let's just accept it that we do lose it. After all, we are humans, right? But when the situation is different, we keep our patience, we keep our cool. Why does that happen?
So I think when you talk about the difference between the two, compassion could be one. You feel, I won't say sympathy or whatever, but compassion could be one, but I have a feeling that expectation is another big factor. So when Anvay, for example, let's say he's not able to sit up or whatever, I know that it is very difficult for him to do that or reach that particular stage. So I understand and I accept. With our other children, what happens, and the word you can use is actually neurotypical. That's the word I learned, because normal, like you say, sometimes can be, others could take offense. Oh, is my child not normal? So the word they use is neurotypical. So what happens is that we are not willing to give that slack to our children, because we expect them to be, say, whatever, perfect, and sometimes we do it even between our two neurotypical children. कि तेरा बड़ा, like I can always tell Abir, अरे अर्नव तो वो कभी इतना naughty नहीं था, but that's where the whole thing comes, but because Abir is different. So if his impulse, or if he's more energetic, or if he is someone who loves to scream, then I need to manage it that way. I can't manage Abir the way I managed Arnav. So what I lose my cool over will differ between the two children. But then the risk also is that Anna will come and say, or Abir will say, acha mama usko to tumhe aise kaha. But so again there is a balance, but the main thing is to be able to expect, to manage your expectations and understand that maybe, or if you even take Tare Zameen Pe, that child really did not understand, but the parents didn't know that, so they kept screaming, or let's say that dad. So that expectation was not matching that own child's internal behavior, or attitude, or in this case there was a particular issue that one needs to tackle. So that's where the personalities of our children, I think, become or just take for example mediocrity, right? Indian parents especially are obsessed with marks. So a 70% is not considered good, so 50, forget it. So of course at one end you should teach your child to do their best, and that is what I'm trying to teach Arnav, for example, who I think has a very good brain but doesn't apply it. So I'm trying to train him, but I also don't want to put that pressure on him. If there is something else he likes, so I need to match my expectations of behavior to what that child is offering me, frankly. you know and that is where I think we can control or whatever.
Yeah, very, very nicely explained, Sakshi, and thank you for highlighting that it is our own expectations and acceptance of the fact that we want our children to be the best. Of course, we want them to be the best, but best is best. You can't compare it with something else, right? The best has to be what is best for the child, and not
Absolutely.
what you think in terms of comparison is the best test, right? So there is no relative comparison here. There is no, saying that okay, that one does this, so why can't you do it? And let's all accept it that we all do this, including myself, you, all of us. I don't think there would be a parent who would say that they haven't done a comparison, whether it is our generation or the generation before or later. Yes, I would say people are evolving, the parenting styles are evolving. So that is one. And second, I think, Saki, you've raised a very, very important thing that no two children are the same, even if they are siblings, even if they are born from the same set of parents. They are different. So your parenting style cannot be the same for all the children. One. Two, obviously, as Sakshi highlighted, that there is a risk that you run that usko to allow kiya, but mujhe nahi kiya, and so on and so forth. Which I think in earlier times, most often they're not used to happen when there are these siblings for a boy and a girl, because the rules of the game were different for a boy child and different for a girl child. But I think in today's time, it isn't about the gender; it is about the personality of a child.
Yeah.
And rather than having the clash of the personality between the parent and the child, I think it is important, for parents to understand what the personality of the child is. That is one. And second, I think, Sakshi did highlight that it is very important that before we understand the personality of the child, it is extremely essential and important to understand what is our personality, you know and because we also, as people, have changed and evolved. We are also making changes, because that's what we all understand, that change is the only thing which is constant. So if we are changing, so are the children. So why not just accept it? Because I think as a first step, and I mean, of course, I'm yet to read the book, but little that I've understood from the synopsis that Sakshi has shared with us today, that raising capable children can only happen when we ourselves make ourselves capable to raise those children. So I'm not sure if I have been able to articulate this better, and there is a lot of food for thought for myself over here, that if I'm expecting that my child should be in a certain manner, then what about expecting myself to be in a certain manner, to be able to raise her in a certain manner? So it is not just about them, it is about us, because parenting starts with us. We are the parents. We want to raise them as per our whims and fancies. But the question is whether our whims and fancies is the right way. Have we ever thought from a child's point of view? What is it that the child wants? There was this point that Sakshi and I were talking informally before this conversation, that a lot of us, when children meet other people, some uncle and auntie, we tell them, say hello. And our children don't want to say. And we'll say, no, you have to say, you have to say. And then there is a big fuss around it. You come home and then you're like, blah, 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 blah. You didn't do this, you didn't do this. Without realizing that maybe the child doesn't want to do it. So we don't get into the understanding as to why the child didn't want to do it. Many times it might just be a fun part of it. कि ऐसा मुझे नहीं करना है. The other part could be there could be something more than that. Do we dwell into it? I don't think so. Even if I talk for myself, I don't think so. Many times, and I think we do this because somewhere we feel that we have failed. Our values that we are giving to the child, ki beta hello bolo, namaste karte hain, you exchange greetings. We have failed. But is parenting about failure and success? To my mind, I don't think so. Parenting is about raising capable children. It's not who fails and who succeeds. Everybody succeeds with failures as a stepping stone towards it. So, Sakshi, thank you so much. It was brilliant speaking to you. But as the trend is that before I let you go, what is that one piece of advice that you would want to give out to the parents, to the mothers who are listening to us or who would eventually watch us, uh, so that they have some food for thought and they are able to raise capable children? And you need to unmute yourself here.
Sorry. Yeah. No, I'm just saying thanks again. I think it was a very, very interesting conversation. And I don't think I want to call it advice, because advice to me seems like it's coming from someone here to someone here. So, food for thought, probably yes. You used a few words like you said success and so on. So, I just feel that even this whole word success, we really need to define it. In fact, it was one of my first few blogs about what is success. Typically, in our society, success is position, money, whatever. And again, if that is what we are trying to push our children into, we need to think back. I um, there's someone I know who's very who sort of led her life the way she wanted to, doing things very differently, probably doing sports and stuff with her daughter, and not taking the typical route that a lot of us have had, jobs and whatever. So, and frankly, to me, I mean, I used to envy that this is such a nice thing, but once I heard that she didn't feel very happy seeing how some of her other batchmates and all are doing in good positions or good earnings. And what I felt bad about was that, you know here she was, she took the choices, or she made the choices she wanted to, but that regret probably should not then be there. And that comes from this whole conditioning that probably to her it seemed that those of her batchmates who are now earning well are doing better than her, is probably not right. So now if my son, these days Arnav has decided that he wants to live in a caravan, and frankly it is okay if he grows up at 20, he still feels that he wants to live out of a caravan and is able to get his whatever meals and all that. It's fine with me. Why should I be bothered if he's able to make a house for himself and whatever? I mean, as long as he has enough money to get by. And of course, because of my push to him for taking care of Anvay. He says that there'll be one wagon for Anvay for him. So I think I'm fine with that. Why do I need to tell him that no, you are successful when you are making a good salary? No, right? So that day when I heard her feel bad about it, I felt really bad. I said, no, you're doing so well. You're doing what you wanted to. You don't need to bind yourself by what the society thinks is successful. Of course, if she
Absolutely.
doesn't have enough money to get by or she can't feed her daughter, then I can understand. But otherwise, well, that's your choice. Live like
You
that.
know, here I'd like to quote something that I read in Sadhguru's autobiography or any of his books, that he wanted to travel, extensively. He wanted to look at different terrains, because when he used to pass through a terrain, it used to be in his mind that he could close his eyes and the next day just walk through that entire path. But he realized that, and which was engraved by his parents, who probably wanted him to take the conventional route of study and become something, earn money, that typical assembly line that we all follow. And he did realize that if he has to pursue his dreams, he needs money. So he, in order to fulfill his dream, did work, did start a business, did extremely well to be able to earn and fulfill his passion. So many a times, what we as parents feel, that the child wants to be something which is not the regular, the doctors and the engineers or the regular corporate jobs and everything, but they want to do something different. Why not? If your passion can be your work, or your work can be your passion, I think it is important that to understand that what is it that the child or the individual wants to do, and when they're able to do so, and if in the process they're able to make money, because I'm sure, if we give the right set of guidance and values toward the children, they will eventually realize that if they want to do something or they want to achieve something, there is something that is required to do so. And if that is money, which cannot be denied, then so be it. So then they need to figure out
Yeah,
how they need to get
exactly.
there. So,
Yes.
I think it is important that, this is just one thought that I'm sharing, that rather than creating robots, let's create thinking minds. And if we explain it to the child in a manner that, look, you want to become an artist? Sure, by all means, go ahead. But have you thought of your sustenance? Because at the end of the day, that is equally important. So maybe the child will understand that, okay, I need to study so that if this doesn't work, I have something to fall back on. And I remember meeting a shopkeeper where I used to, buy my regular stuff, and I think it was the pre-board results that the child had got, and I think he had scored 35%. And the father and the mother were fuming, and they didn't know where their son was, and so they asked someone else to give him a call and tell him that, come home. Your parents want to throw a party for the fantastic thing that you have done. 35% is like blah blah blah. I mean, and he was obviously being sarcastic about it. So, and I was there, and he was telling me कि भाभी जी देखिए कैसे बच्चे हैं, 35 नंबर लेके आया है, क्या करेगा लाइफ में, कहता है कि हीरो बनूंगा. So I asked him, I said, तो हीरो बनने में क्या प्रॉब्लम है, पढ़ तो ले, क्या हीरो बनेगा, ये वो शक्ल नहीं अकल, then the parents, he just went on. So I told him, I said, have you ever tried to explain this to your child? He can become a hero, but to become a hero, what is it that he has to do? I said, try a different route. Maybe he'll understand. So, great, Sakshi. That's a very good discussion talk that we've had today. And, I have read some of Sakshi's blogs, and they indeed, make you think. There are very interesting things that she has shared, and that is the culmination of the blog is the book that she has written, which is Raising Capable Children. I urge each one of you to read. It's available on Amazon, and through the Motherhood Club, you can also put some questions if you want to Sakshi. If not now, at a later point in time, and I'm sure Sakshi would be happy to address those questions. And Sakshi, we wish you all the very best, and I really hope that all the three turn out to be capable in their own ways, and all the very best. And I once again salute you for all the decisions that you and your family have taken, and you have highlighted that how important it is to understand that raising children or raising capable children is not just the job of a mother. It is the parents, it is the family who all collectively need to be there for each other, so that through this also you convey a message that everybody has their own identities, because what you will convey to the children is what they will understand. So brilliant, Sakshi. Kudos to all of you. Please to congratulate your mom, your in-laws, and your husband. And you're doing great. So thank you so much for being with us at the Motherhood Club Talk Show. So thank you everybody for being with us. We shall be back again with yet another interesting journey of a inspiring mother very soon. Till then, stay tuned with us. This is Ekta Sehgal Malhotra signing off. Thank you, Sakshi. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you and
Really
take care.
nice. Thanks. Bye bye.